On a cold, stormy night in 2023, the waves crashed violently against the rocks surrounding Battery Point Lighthouse in Crescent City, California. The lighthouse, standing resolutely on its rocky outcrop, had endured countless storms since it was first lit in 1856. But on this particular night, something far more unsettling than nature's fury was about to unfold. Those who dared to visit the lighthouse that year would speak of eerie occurrences that defied logic, leaving even the most skeptical shaken. They say that the sea, the wind, and the light itself whispered secrets that should never have been uncovered. The first sign of trouble came from a pair of tourists who decided to visit the lighthouse during low tide. Battery Point Lighthouse can only be reached by a rocky pathway that becomes visible when the tide recedes. These visitors, eager to explore the historic site, ignored the warnings of the locals, who believed the lighthouse was more than just a relic of the past. The tourists claimed that as they approached the lighthouse, they felt an overwhelming sense of being watched, though no one else was present. The waves seemed to grow louder, as if the sea itself was trying to drown out a sound they couldn't quite hear. Inside the lighthouse, the atmosphere was heavy, suffocating almost. The air felt thick and humid despite the chill of the evening. As the tourists climbed the spiral staircase leading to the lantern room, they began to hear faint whispers. At first, they dismissed it as the wind howling through the structure, but as they ascended further, the whispers grew louder and clearer. One of them claimed to hear a woman's voice repeating the phrase, "Stay away, you don't belong here." By the time they reached the top, one of the tourists refused to go any further, paralyzed by fear. The other, driven by curiosity, stepped into the lantern room and immediately froze. The room was illuminated not by the steady beam of the lighthouse, but by a flickering, unnatural light. In the corner of the room, they both swore they saw a figure, a shadowy silhouette of a woman in a long dress. Her face was obscured, and yet they felt her gaze pierce through them, colder than the sea breeze outside. They fled the lighthouse, stumbling back across the rocky path as the tide began to rise. When they reached the mainland, they found their car covered in salt water, despite it being parked far from the waves. Shaken but unharmed, they shared their story with locals who only nodded knowingly, as if this was not the first time such an event had occurred. The story spread quickly, and more curious visitors began to flock to Battery Point Lighthouse, hoping to catch a glimpse of the ghostly figure. Some claimed to hear faint piano music coming from the lighthouse at night, a tune that didn't match any known melody. Others reported seeing the light of the lighthouse flicker erratically, even on clear nights when no storms were present. The Coast Guard, responsible for maintaining the structure, dismissed these claims, attributing them to overactive imaginations and the unpredictable coastal weather. But the rumors became harder to ignore when a local historian uncovered an unsettling piece of the lighthouse's past. Records showed that in the late 19th century, a keeper's wife had tragically drowned in the surrounding waters while trying to retrieve their child who had wandered too close to the tide. The child survived, but the mother did not. Her body was never recovered, and her husband, overcome with grief, took his own life in the lantern room just a week later. The lighthouse had been operational ever since, but stories of strange occurrences dated back to that very tragedy. In the following months, a paranormal investigation team decided to spend the night at the lighthouse to document any activity. They set up cameras, motion detectors, and audio recording devices throughout the structure. At first, the night was uneventful, but as the tide rose and the lighthouse was cut off from the mainland, the equipment began to malfunction. Cameras shut off without explanation, and motion detectors were triggered in empty rooms. Around midnight, one of the investigators reported feeling a sudden drop in temperature, despite no windows being open. Shortly after, the team heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps on the spiral staircase. They rushed to investigate, only to find no one there. However, when they reviewed the audio recordings the next morning, they were stunned to hear a voice clearly say, "Why have you come?" The investigation team left the lighthouse shaken, convinced they had encountered something beyond their understanding. They released their findings to the public, and the story of Battery Point Lighthouse became a national sensation. Skeptics continued to dismiss the claims, but those who had experienced the strange phenomena firsthand knew the truth. The most chilling account came from a local fisherman who often anchored near the lighthouse at night. He claimed that on particularly stormy evenings, he could see a woman standing at the edge of the rocks, staring out at the sea. He described her as wearing an old-fashioned dress, her hair blowing wildly in the wind. No matter how fierce the storm, she remained unmoving, as if she was waiting for someone or something. The fisherman tried to approach her one night, rowing his boat closer to the shore. But as he neared, the woman vanished into thin air, leaving behind only the echo of her voice. "He won't come back." The fisherman later learned about the lighthouse keeper's wife and her tragic death. He believed the woman he saw was her spirit, forever bound to the place where she had lost everything. Even today, Battery Point Lighthouse continues to draw visitors who are both fascinated and terrified by its haunted history. Some come to marvel at its architectural beauty and stunning coastal views, while others hope to catch a glimpse of the mysterious figure who guards it. The lighthouse remains a beacon, not just for sailors navigating the treacherous waters, but for those seeking answers to the mysteries that linger long after death. Whether the haunting is real or simply the product of overactive imaginations, one thing is certain: Battery Point Lighthouse holds secrets that may never be fully uncovered. And as the tide rises each evening, cutting the lighthouse off from the rest of the world, it becomes a place suspended in time where the past and present collide in eerie, unforgettable ways. The St. Augustine Lighthouse, towering over the Florida coastline since 1874, is not merely a functional beacon for sailors, but a historic monument steeped in tales of tragedy, mystery, and unending spectral activity. For over a century, it has stood resilient against the forces of nature, a silent witness to countless stories of human triumph and despair, each leaving an indelible mark on its walls. But within its enduring light lies a shadowed history that continues to captivate, chill, and terrify all who dare to explore its depths. The story begins long before the current lighthouse was constructed, with the site itself drenched in history, dating back to the 16th century, when the Spanish first established a settlement in the area. The original watchtower, a rudimentary structure, stood as a sentinel over the rugged shoreline, but was eventually replaced due to structural failures and the advancing coastline. By the time the existing lighthouse was built, the area had already earned a reputation as a place of loss and sorrow. Shipwrecks littered the nearby waters, claiming the lives of countless sailors. Their cries lost to the winds, yet, it is said, still echoing faintly in the present day. One of the lighthouse's most haunting tales is that of the keeper's daughters, whose laughter once filled the air before tragedy silenced it forever. In the late 1800s, Eliza and Mary, daughters of the construction supervisor, played innocently near the site. They delighted in riding a cart used to transport materials, oblivious to the looming danger. On a fateful day, the cart broke free and plunged into a water-filled pit, trapping and drowning the girls. Their heart-wrenching cries for help came too late, and the site was forever marred by their loss. Visitors and staff have since reported the inexplicable sounds of children laughing and playing, echoing through the empty grounds. Shadows of small figures dart just out of sight, and some have even claimed to see a young girl in a white dress peering curiously from the top of the stairs before disappearing into thin air. It is said that the playful spirits of Eliza and Mary have never truly left, their innocent mischief now part of the lighthouse's eerie charm. But their story is not the only tragedy tied to this haunting structure. Another ghostly figure associated with the saint, Augustine Lighthouse, is Peter Rasmussen, a former keeper known for his strict demeanor and passion for cigars. Rasmussen's spirit, as reported by numerous visitors, seems to linger near his beloved workplace. Guests frequently describe catching the distinct scent of a cigar's smoke in areas where smoking is strictly prohibited. This olfactory anomaly, combined with sightings of a stern-looking man in period attire, leaves little doubt in the minds of believers that Rasmussen continues to oversee the lighthouse's operations from beyond the grave. Adding to this spectral ensemble is the story of Joseph Andreu, another keeper who tragically fell to his death while painting the tower. His life was cut short in a horrifying accident as he plummeted from the towering structure, leaving his wife and children to grieve. Since his untimely death, a shadowy figure has been seen wandering the lighthouse, particularly near the staircase where he spent so much of his life. Some visitors claim to feel a heavy presence, as if someone is watching them with sorrowful eyes. These ghostly encounters are not merely anecdotal, but have been corroborated by numerous paranormal investigators. One of the lighthouse's most infamous nights occurred during a violent hurricane, a storm so fierce that even the lighthouse's guiding light could not prevent disaster. Multiple ships foundered on the jagged rocks of the coastline, their crews swallowed by the unforgiving sea. The cries of the drowning sailors are said to have left a permanent imprint on the area. Even today, on stormy nights, their desperate calls can reportedly be heard amidst the howling winds. Some have described seeing phantom ships sailing silently across the horizon, only to vanish without a trace. It is as though the lighthouse itself bears the grief of the countless souls lost to the sea, its light now serving as a solemn tribute to those it could not save. These stories have made the saint, Augustine Lighthouse, a magnet for paranormal enthusiasts and ghost hunters alike, each eager to document its supernatural phenomena. Teams of investigators, armed with advanced equipment, have captured chilling evidence, voices calling out from the void, unexplained footsteps echoing through empty hallways, and cold spots that seem to appear out of nowhere. One of the most famous investigations was conducted by the crew of Ghost Hunters, a popular TV show, during which they experienced an array of unexplainable events, including the sighting of a shadowy figure high in the tower. Despite the eerie happenings, the lighthouse remains operational and open to the public, drawing thousands of visitors each year. Its dual identity as a historical landmark and a paranormal hotspot has only enhanced its allure. People come from all over the world, some in search of history and others in pursuit of the supernatural. Many leave with more than they bargained for, sharing accounts of disembodied whispers, unseen hands brushing against their skin, and an overwhelming sense of being watched. The stories surrounding the lighthouse are as varied as they are chilling, each one adding another layer to its mystique. Yet, for all its hauntings, the Saint Augustine Lighthouse stands as a testament to human resilience and ingenuity. It is a place where history and the paranormal collide, a living reminder that some stories are never truly finished. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, the lighthouse's tales are impossible to ignore, each one beckoning you to explore the fine line between the past and the present, the living and the dead. It is a place where time seems to stand still, where every shadow carries a story, and where the light, no matter how bright, can never fully chase away the darkness. Ella inherited the lighthouse, but she had no idea what she was really inheriting. The letter came one chilly autumn morning, the kind of letter that would change her life forever. Her estranged grandfather, Robert Ashford, the last keeper of Ashford Island Lighthouse, had passed away. She was his only living relative, and as per his will, the lighthouse, an old crumbling structure perched on a desolate, fog-shrouded island off the coast, was now hers. Ella had heard little about her grandfather since she was a child. The few times they'd crossed paths had been awkward, marked by his distant nature and cryptic warnings about the island. Her parents never spoke of him, and she'd never understood why he'd chosen a life of isolation on such a remote island, away from family and society. But now, with his death, Ella was left to deal with the inheritance of a property that felt like a relic of a forgotten past. With a mix of curiosity and a sense of obligation, she decided to visit the lighthouse, hoping to sort things out and decide what to do with the property. What she found there, however, would soon unravel a mystery far darker than she could have ever imagined. When Ella arrived on Ashford Island, the first thing she noticed was the silence. The island was shrouded in a thick, damp fog, and the air was heavy with the smell of salt and decay. The lighthouse itself stood like a forgotten sentinel, its white paint peeling and its windows shattered, yet somehow still standing tall against the relentless forces of nature. It was as if the island was frozen in time, untouched by the modern world. The small cottage near the lighthouse where her grandfather had lived seemed just as abandoned, furniture covered in dust, the hearth long cold. As Ella stepped inside, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The place felt too still, too quiet. It was as though her grandfather had left only hours ago, not years. Yet no one had set foot on the island in ages. She tried to push away the unease creeping up her spine, thinking it was just the isolation of the place playing tricks on her mind. Exploring the lighthouse, Ella found the lantern still burning in the tower. It was dim but steady, casting an eerie glow over the island. The light had been left on for years, even though the lighthouse had supposedly been abandoned. It was the first strange thing she noticed. How could the lamp still be functioning when no one had been here to maintain it? More curious still, there was a journal on the desk in the lighthouse keeper's quarters, her grandfather's journal, she realized when she opened it. The first few pages were mundane, detailing the daily tasks of a lighthouse keeper, cleaning, checking the light, maintaining the equipment. But as she flipped through the pages, the tone began to change. Her grandfather's handwriting grew erratic and anxious, as if something was slowly unraveling his sanity. He wrote about hearing strange noises at night, whispers on the wind, footsteps echoing through the tower when no one was there, and the unsettling feeling of being watched by something that was not human. The journal detailed his obsession with the island's history, especially a shipwreck that had occurred many years ago. According to local lore, the wreck had claimed the lives of many sailors, and the survivors spoke of seeing a shadowy figure standing in the lighthouse during the storm. Her grandfather believed that the lighthouse was cursed, its light drawing the spirits of the dead to the island. He wrote that the figure in the lighthouse was not a ghost, but something far darker, a malevolent force tied to the very land. Ella was disturbed by the journal's contents but didn't know what to make of it. She dismissed it as her grandfather's delusions, the ramblings of a man who had spent too much time alone in the company of the ocean winds. Yet, as the days passed, the strange occurrences began to intensify. At night, she would hear the unmistakable sound of footsteps on the stairs leading up to the tower, though no one was there when she checked. Sometimes she would wake up in the middle of the night to find the lantern in the tower glowing brighter than before, casting long, distorted shadows across the island. One evening, while walking along the shore, she saw a figure standing at the top of the lighthouse, a shadowy form outlined against the dimming sky. The figure was tall and thin, and though the fog obscured most of its features, the shape seemed eerily familiar. She felt an overwhelming sense of dread, but when she climbed the winding staircase to the top, there was no one there. The tension mounted as Ella began to delve deeper into the island's past. She learned from the few remaining townsfolk that her grandfather had not been the first lighthouse keeper to go mad. In fact, every keeper of Ashford Island Lighthouse had either vanished or died under mysterious circumstances. The most chilling part of the story was about the first keeper, a man named Elias Walker, who had disappeared one night without a trace. Some said he had gone mad, others that he had been taken by the very thing that her grandfather had written about, a dark, shadowy entity that haunted the island. The locals believed the lighthouse was cursed, a beacon that lured the souls of the dead to the island, where they could never leave. One night, after a particularly unsettling encounter with the figure she had seen in the lighthouse, Ella discovered a hidden compartment in the lighthouse keeper's desk. Inside, she found an old photograph, her grandfather as a young man, standing with a man who looked identical to the figure she had seen in the tower. The man in the photo was wearing the same lighthouse keeper's uniform. She realized with a jolt that the man in the photo was Elias Walker, the first keeper, the one who had vanished years ago. Her grandfather, it seemed, had not just been obsessed with the lighthouse's history, he had been haunted by it. He had seen the figure of Elias Walker, and it had driven him to madness. And now, it seemed, the entity that haunted the island was beginning to turn its attention to her. The more Ella uncovered, the clearer it became that the lighthouse was not just a building, it was a prison, a place that trapped the souls of those who had been connected to it. The light, which had never gone out, was not a guide for ships, but a beacon that kept the restless spirits trapped in an endless cycle of torment. The ghost of Elias Walker, and perhaps others, were now trying to pull her into that same cycle. One stormy night, the figure appeared again, this time standing in the doorway of the lighthouse tower. Ella, heart pounding, confronted the figure, her voice shaking as she demanded to know what it wanted. The figure did not speak, but reached out to her with a cold, spectral hand. She refused. With every ounce of strength, she ran from the lighthouse, determined to leave the island behind. But as she fled, she could hear the footsteps of the phantom keeper following her, always just out of sight. Ella never returned to Ashford Island. The lighthouse, still standing in the fog, waits for its next keeper. And as the light continues to shine, the spirits trapped within it grow restless, yearning for the one who will finally take their place.